Below are 10 of the most horrifying death sentences that actually happened in history. 1. Crucifixion, Ancient Rome and beyond. Crucifixion is one of the most well-known brutal ways of execution. It was used during Roman times but has appeared in other societies as well. The person was nailed or tied to a wooden cross and left to hang. This wasn't a quick death, it could take hours or even days. The person would die slowly from exhaustion, dehydration, and pain. The most famous example of crucifixion is Jesus Christ, but thousands of others were crucified too. For example, after a slave uprising led by Spartacus in 71 BCE, the Romans crucified over 6,000 captured slaves along the Appian Way, a road leading into Rome. Their bodies were left on display to scare anyone who dared rebel again. 2. Death by boiling, Medieval Europe and Asia. Boiling people alive was used as punishment for serious crimes like poisoning or treason. The victim would be placed in a large pot of water or oil, and the heat would be increased slowly. This made sure the pain lasted longer. Sometimes, the boiling would take hours. One of the most infamous stories comes from England in 1531. A man named Richard Roos was accused of poisoning food in a bishop's home. King Henry VIII ordered Roos to be boiled alive in front of a crowd as a warning. The sight and smell were said to be so terrible that people were haunted for years. 3. Lingchi, Death by 1,000 Cuts, China. Lingchi was used in China until the early 20th century. It involved slicing small pieces of flesh from the victim's body over a long period of time. The person would be tied to a wooden post, and the executioner would make dozens or even hundreds of cuts. While the cuts started small, they grew larger over time. Eventually, the person would die from blood loss or shock. Lingchi was meant to be both a punishment and a form of humiliation. One of the last known cases of Lingchi happened in 1905 when a man was executed for murdering a prince. 4. The breaking wheel, Medieval Europe. The breaking wheel, also called the Catherine wheel, was one of the most painful ways to die in medieval Europe. The victim would be tied to a large wooden wheel. The executioner would then smash their limbs with a heavy iron club or hammer. Sometimes, the broken limbs were threaded through the spokes of the wheel, and the person was left to die slowly. In some cases, the wheel would be raised on a pole for everyone to see. The person could survive for days. A famous victim was a German outlaw named Peter Neers in the 16th century. He was tortured on the wheel before being killed. 5. Scaphism, Ancient Persia. Scaphism was one of the most horrifying death sentences ever recorded. It was used in ancient Persia. The victim was trapped between two wooden boats or hollowed-out logs. Their head, arms, and legs were left outside, but their body was trapped inside. The executioners would pour milk and honey over the person's exposed body, especially their face and limbs. This attracted insects, which would bite and crawl all over them. The victim was also forced to drink milk and honey, causing severe diarrhea inside the boat. The combination of filth, insect bites, and exposure to the sun led to infection, fever, and a slow, painful death. It could take over a week for the person to die. 6. Sawing in half, various regions. Sawing a person in half was a punishment used in parts of Europe, Asia, and Africa. The victim would be hung upside down, with their legs tied apart. Then, executioners would slowly saw the person in half, starting at the groin. Hanging the person upside down kept blood flowing to the brain, which meant the person would stay alive longer. It was meant to be a message to anyone who broke the law. In some cases, the sawing stopped at the chest, leaving the victim to die slowly. 7. Burning at the stake, Europe. Burning people alive was used across Europe, especially during the Middle Ages and the early modern period. It was often used to punish people accused of witchcraft or heresy. The victim was tied to a wooden stake surrounded by flammable materials like straw and wood. Once the fire was lit, the person would suffer severe burns and smoke inhalation. In some cases, the flames burned so slowly that the person died only after several hours. One famous victim of this punishment was Joan of Arc, a French heroine who was burned at the stake in 1431 after being accused of heresy. 8. Flang Alive, Assyrian Empire and others. Flang involves removing a person's skin while they are still alive. This punishment was used in ancient Assyria, as well as other regions, to instill fear. The executioner would start by cutting small sections of the skin, peeling it back slowly and painfully. One horrifying example comes from the Assyrian Empire, where enemies of the state were flayed and their skins were hung on city walls as a warning. Flaying was so painful that death from shock or blood loss often came quickly. However, for some victims, the process could last for hours. 9. The Brezen Bull, Ancient Greece. The Brazen Bull was a hollow bronze statue shaped like a bull. It was used as a method of execution in ancient Greece. The victim would be placed inside the bull, and a fire would be lit underneath. As the bronze heated up, the person inside would be roasted alive. The bull was designed so the screams of the victim would sound like the roar of an actual bull. The first victim of this invention was said to be its creator, Paralus of Athens. According to legend, the tyrant Phalaris ordered Paralus to test his own creation. 10. Impalement, Vlad the Impaler and others. Impalement was a brutal method of execution where the victim was pierced through the body with a long, sharp pole. The pole was often driven through the person's bottom and pushed up through their chest, neck, or mouth. Vlad the Impaler, a 15th century ruler of Wallachia, modern-day Romania, is famous for using this method. It is said that he impaled tens of thousands of his enemies. The poles were placed in public areas so that others would see the gruesome display. Death was slow, sometimes taking hours or days, depending on how the pole was positioned. These punishments show the extremes humans have gone to when enforcing laws, spreading fear, or seeking revenge. While these methods are no longer used today, they remind us of the importance of justice and humanity in society.